wrong. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Astral Line, a show where we will bring on guests and professionals from the entertainment industry, and we will talk about things relevant to those fields. Things like anime, manga, comics, movie, TV shows, music. You get the idea. Joining me today are two professionals who are involved with comics, video games, and music. Go ahead and bring them over here. If you guys like to introduce yourselves, we'll start with Mr. David Byrne.
Hey, I'm David Byrne. I'm a comic writer and publisher.
Solo.
Well, as mentioned, I am Solo. I'm a musician. I work with game design, doing a lot of soundtracks, and I work with comic editing as well for a certain Isaac Fox.
It's true.
Mysterious
Surprised David you didn't go on the long list of like all these amazing titles that you've done and all these like legendary things you've accomplished. You're so modest, man. We should all be like you.
Yes, let me get out my CV. I've got it all printed here.
Yeah, just the whole thing.
At all. I did. Oh, I'm not prepared.
So what we're going to do on the show is we aren't really doing interviews and things like that. The idea of the show is we're going to bring on people who have experience in the fields and talk about things that are relevant to those fields. So a big one right now that we've experienced a lot in Hollywood, or the current hot trend in both the East and the West, is making live action adaptations of animated or drawn media. We are seeing this very heavily right now, and mixed reviews from critics and audiences alike. Many of these new live-action adaptations are pulled from the world of anime and cartoons. We see things like Cowboy Bebop, One Piece, Rurouni Kenshin, Yu Yu Hakusho, and the upcoming Avatar: The Last Airbender, and even more. What I'd like to do, guys, is get your thoughts on this. What do you think of this trend? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Should the classics be left alone? Are there live-action adaptations of things you want to see? And if so, how should they be executed? What do you guys think about that?
That was a lot of questions at once.
Generally, just anything you feel about how live action adaptations have been. Are they a good thing? Are they a bad thing? Are people doing them incorrectly? Do you feel like they can be good if they stay true to the source material? Do they need to deviate? Just anything in that category.
Personally, I think they're a good thing, but you can't blanket say they're all good or they're all bad because they're really all over the place. Even things like, on occasion, like Fight Club, I think the author said he thought the movie was better than his book, which that doesn't happen very often.
No, that's pretty good praise actually.
Yeah,
there are definitely some live actions I think were really good. This may be controversial. My favorite was Battle Angel Alita. The movie was fantastically carried out. The CG was not by any ways distracting or disorienting like the green screens and a lot of more modern comic films tend to be. That being said,
I enjoyed that one too. Yeah,
I've heard the new One Piece show is actually really good. I haven't watched it. Solo, have you seen any of that? Anything live action?
I've seen about 4 episodes of it because a friend got me starting to read it, and then that came out, and it's probably, based on what I've seen, one of the best received live action adaptations. The mangaka, or however you pronounce that himself, was involved with it in various degrees. And I think the reason that it, again, to go real deep into it right off the bat, the reason it works is because they have the liberty to do whatever the heck they want. Because, hey, let's take 1,000+ episode anime series and start making a live action version of it. Best of luck on that pacing.
It's ambitious.
So that's part of the fun of that is that if you want to get really technical, as David and I both work in comic books, any of the Batman films, Superman films, or the Marvel Universe, those are all live action adaptations of comic books. And we've seen them executed really well, and we've seen them done not so well. Looking at you, Bat Nipples, George Clooney. But we've also seen movies like the Christian Bale Batman that was phenomenal. If you guys have different opinions, that's totally fine. Like, not everybody has to like everything. But we've also getting things like the Cowboy Bebop show that I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on, but the scenes that I've seen have made me wonder if the people who worked on it were aware there was an anime or manga to pull from.
No, I have seen. That's probably the only anime I've seen the live action as well, and I enjoyed both, but in a vacuum. Like if I was watching,
that's totally fair.
Yeah, and if I was watching the live action and trying to compare it to the anime, because I'd literally just watched it probably a couple months before the live action came out, so it was very fresh. I probably would have been upset if I was trying to connect them. but when I tried to separate it as much as I could, knowing it was going to be a shorter and a live action. So I don't know. Maybe that's the key, trying not to connect your favorite things to the new version and just letting it be what it is.
I think that's actually a really good angle, though, because Bebop was then fresh for you. You didn't have the nostalgia from years and years ago to build up over time, which effectively acts as a magnifying glass to amplify how good something is or is not. I have made the mistake of going back and watching a few cartoons that I loved as a kid from the 90s. But this show was so good. I watched it going, I watched this? I high on corn, like cough syrup the entire time? This is terrible. Anything viewed through nostalgia glasses is amplified and made way better, and you can't live up to nostalgia's expectations. And it's not really fair to hold anything that comes out after to that, but it's going to happen. But I'm extremely curious to see what happens with Last Airbender being quite possibly the most highly spoken Western cartoon of all time. So I really want to see what they're going to do with that. David or Slow, did you guys ever watch Airbender?
Oh,
I did not.
I watched the heck out of it. And I mean, I'll break the taboo and say they already made a live action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk. I did. We're not going to talk about that. I saw it day one in theaters, and it was
My condolences.
Yeah, it's like finding out Santa Claus isn't real. Like, it was just destroyed all your hopes and dreams. You're like, what is this?
See, and I had no connection to the original series, so honestly, like, I don't even remember how I reacted to seeing the M. Night Shyamalan version in theaters. I know I saw it there, but like, I think it was one of those, it was just a thing to me because I didn't have any connection to the series.
There is like an entire 10 episode sequence that is condensed down into 2 sentences narrated by plays Katara. Like, my brother fell in love with the moon spirit and then she had to become the moon. That's a massive arc that plays a huge role in character development and growth and making these essentially a cast of children face the reality of being an adult. And we just kind of skimmed over that in favor of, I don't know. Okay.
You sound offended.
I'm so curious how Shyamalan has a job after that movie, but I mean, clearly somebody in Hollywood knows something I don't. But there's other live action adaptations that we're seeing new ones now. I heard the Rurouni Kenshin one's pretty good. I don't know. David, you don't probably watch a lot of anime, right?
I don't know.
That is totally fair. We can go with Batman. I presume we've all seen a billion adaptations of Batman. Mm-hmm. Did you see the most recent Batman film?
I did, yes.
Yes.
So as a comic book professional, I want to hear your opinion on this Batman and how Robert Pattinson portrayed the character.
I mean, honestly, I thought he did a pretty good job. My main criticism of the film was that it meandered a bit and some of the scenes really dragged on. But I mean, I think they had issues in production that kind of led to that. So that's the main issue there. But it was interesting that they combined a number of existing and popular storylines to make one. So overall, I did like it, and I have no issues with Pattinson as Batman personally.
That seems fair. So, did you see it by chance?
Yes, I did, and I had pretty much the same reaction where it's like, "Oh, the core of this is great. Why is this here?
Yeah.
Why are we spending so much time on? Yeah.
Oh, I remember this scene there. I don't think it's a spoiler. They're looking into a cage, and it's like literally drags on for
oh my gosh,
almost 2 minutes where he's just looking in this cage, and even the opening scene where he's just looking across the street, and it feels like it was like 3 to 5 minutes, and you're just like, can we start the movie? I feel like you could have cut 45 minutes out of the movie just like condensing some of the long shots that they had.
Yep. Editing writing is just cutting out words. Editing movies is cutting out scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how much editing goes into it. I didn't even know. I was watching a documentary on editing literally 2 nights ago, and they had a scene where they're talking to George Clooney, who's obviously a Hollywood A-lister, who's talking about, I've been in entire movies. I thought I was the main character, and it came out and they just cut all of my scenes. I wasn't even in the movie at all, and I thought I was the main character. This happens so often. A good editor can be everything. And from what I understand, certain famous films had very different plot lines. Like Men in Black 1, from what I understand, had a different story entirely until they edited it together and they changed the story through editing, which is fascinating and terrifying. Men in Black would be one of those good examples of a show or a movie that did the opposite, where it was live action and it became a TV show, a very gritty cartoon show back in the 90s. If you guys happen to remember that.
For Men in Black, it's actually based off of an older comic book, even.
Really?
The
I
original.
knew it was a book.
Yeah, it's and it was darker. So the show you're referring to may have been more based on the comic.
So the original comic was actually a lot more of a gritty experience than what we
Yes.
got. The movie was kind of lighthearted, kind of silly.
Yeah, no, it was nothing like that. Trying to find it.
I'm learning all
So I
sorts
wonder-
of new things today.
Well, that's part of the point. Is this is supposed to be intellectual discussions on critical ideas and theories, without just sitting here saying, "Oh, that movie sucks." Okay, well, can you give some reasons why? Like, why, what did it do wrong? What could it have done better? The thing goes to live action a lot in that way, and I think especially in the world of anime and Solo. I know you watch a lot of anime. It's
Guilty.
very hard to transfer that medium into live action because anime and comics do a very amazing thing where they're heavily exaggerated art forms. Characters express themselves in over the top ways, and reactions are to a Looney Tunes level, but it works because it's in that medium. But then when you bring it to real life, well, how do we make that such a big deal? And this
Yeah.
applies to anything from a serious show to all the way to an ecchi. Like, how do you make that same impact, well, impactful?
Anime and comics, I always think of them as the opera of media. Emotions
Sure.
dialed up to 11. The plot may or may not be good, but it's ambitious beyond all reason. And
I think you allow a lot of contrivances to happen just for the sake of making things move forward. And again, another live action thing. I recently saw Spider-Man No Way Home, which is live action film of the Spider-Man comics. And this is a spoiler, so anybody listening, I'm sorry, here's one short spoiler. Have you guys seen that film? No Way Home?
I have not, but I have that
Don't-
wasn't
don't.
on my radar to see.
There's a scene in there where the villain has Spider-Man defeated, and he's
Oh,
just like laying out and ready to be destroyed. And the villain goes, "You know what? I got him beat. I'm just gonna fly away now for absolutely no reason whatsoever. I'm just gonna just f off for
I
no
made my point. I
applicable reason."
proved my point. I'm done.
Yeah, like,
Please tell me
This-
he says that out loud.
I get why this happens, because if villains in any media were competent, then there probably wouldn't be much of a story. But usually in the comics, I've seen like the villain will throw an explosive and see rubble and just go, "Oh, they're dead," and leave. And then somehow they always come back because they're the hero. They have to come back and win somehow in some fashion. Sure. That's what makes these fantasies fun, right? Is that the good guys can actually win.
Well, isn't that the end of every franchise horror movie too?
Yeah, essentially.
The villain's always dead at the end,
Or
but he's not.
But he's not. Hey, look, man, huge Friday the 13th lover. Jason is my boy. But yeah, like we beat Jason. No, you just slowed him down. He's going to get up. Doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah,
That
I
becomes-
watched the last couple of Halloween movies, and it's like, even if the guy's supernatural, there's no way he's surviving all the things they did to him.
Well, yeah. Halloween's one of those series that started off very believable, with Myers just being
Mhm.
not a good portrayal of a psychopath, but definitely a psychotic individual. And then, the longer it went, the more fantastically powerful he became, to the point I'm surprised they haven't made him a playable character in the Kill the Justice League game. Like, if the guy can just do it all, why not just bring him in?
Licensing issues.
Both owned by Warner Brothers.
Are they?
I don't know who owns the Halloween series.
I thought it was New Line at one point, wasn't it?
No idea. So I'm working on getting a guy in a chair who can just have him look up things for me.
I'm doing it right
I need to
now.
look this up, because if I type on this keyboard, my keyboard's like legendarily loud.
clickety
But-
clack.
So here's an example of live action done really poorly, and I want to hear your thoughts on that. Is the Dragon Ball movie that nobody in the world is ever going to talk about with a smile on their face, outside of making fun of it. But mostly it's just tears in your eyes and your hearts, because many of us, being the 90s generation, we grew up watching Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z as our introduction into anime. And they go, "Oh, they're going to make a live action one. How is that going to work?" Well, it doesn't, apparently.
I mean, I laughed my way through it. I had a great time.
That might be a fantastic film to watch while you're in an inebriated state.
Can neither confirm nor deny.
but
State.
I can't imagine it being fun sober. Have you seen that film, David?
I have not. I was after Dragon Ball Z became popular, so I'm
It's
just slightly too old to have gotten into it.
kind of imagine if Doomsday showed up and he can shoot energy from his hands like Starfire, but we gave him the budget of a high school play.
And it took place at a high school.
And it took place at a high school.
And prom.
Oh,
that's
and
fitting.
Doomsday, by the way, is a student in the high school. Like, he's going to school and he has a crush on one of the cheerleaders. That's what happened.
I mean, speaking of that Batman versus Superman movie with Doomsday.
There's a live action adaptation that wasn't executed. So here's perhaps a controversial opinion. I think Henry Cavill was a great Superman. I think he just had nothing to work with.
I could definitely agree with that. I mean, I think I actually laughed out loud when they both said Martha and became best friends.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
I got some looks because I think I did a loud guffaw.
So we've read the comics where Batman and Superman first encounter each other, and I've watched. I don't know, David or Solo, if you guys have watched it in DC's animated universe, which is really good in my opinion. And they have ones there where they first encounter each other, and they always kind of rub shoulders at first and sneer at each other, but they eventually realize why the other one becomes important. Why is no one who's doing the live actions, at least in the West, in the guys who are involved with making the animated or comic versions of it? Why are we barred from doing that?
Yeah, I mean, Marvel seemed to bring them in and embrace them. So
work well. DC did it to an extent back when we did. This is a live action, but we did do the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited shows that were based, entirely off a lot of the Bruce Timm style of things, and they brought in guys from the comics to work with that, and those shows were amazing. The storylines are still good today. I can watch episodes of that show today and still be in tears at how amazing, like, emotional the journeys of the characters are. What happened with this, and why is it that apparently a lot of Western studios don't want people who are actually from it to work on it?
I don't know.
The Witcher show
have been, it could have been the prime directive from Warner Brothers on DC. I mean, they saw what Marvel was doing with their expanded universe or their cinematic universe, and they said do that, but they forgot to do the first part, which was laying all the groundwork and making us like all the characters and everything.
Yeah, that's a really fair point.
How do you introduce characters? Oh yeah, you have the people who know them intimately work with you on producing the movies.
And this comes to one of the biggest problems with the live action adaptation is, hey, let's bring in this visionary new director who's mistaking their ignorance of the subject to a fresh new view of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, I don't know much, but I have a fresh view because I don't know much, which means I'm going to reinvent this wheel.
So that creates an interesting idea, because we have Spider-Man and Batman, the big hitters from Marvel and DC and Western comics. Everybody knows their stories by now, but not literally everybody. So if you were put in charge of making a Spider-Man or Batman film, do you even bother to explain the assassination of Batman's parents or the death of Uncle Ben? Or do you just skip past that and say, well, you guys already know what happened, so we're not going to bother explaining it? Because how many times are we going to see pearls hit the streets of Gotham?
That is a tough question, honestly, because I guess you have to look back at how recently the most recent telling was. Mm-hmm. Because if you're introducing it to a new generation, and this, you can go with the Star Wars on this. I've heard basically we generationally have our trilogies because younger people like the prequels better than the originals, and to me that's unfathomable.
Yeah.
But say what?
But they watched them in order, so not the order that they came out, but the order that they're supposedly meant to be in.
Oh.
So they watched episode 1 first. And
before
if you did that,
expectations.
Yeah, to me, if you did that and then you saw what looks like, so the original Star Wars was incredible production, but it doesn't look like the first ones at all. So if you started off with the episodes 1 through 3, and then you go into 4 through 6, there's a drastic change there. I mean, it looks like it went from being in the future to being in the past.
Yeah.
Cool, because they pulled all the. Remember the why are you on? I'm so sorry. I'm supposed to be turned off. They are supposed to have. If you go back and look at like any sci-fi thing from the 70s and 80s, they've all got the exact same gray panel buttons. Alien, Star Wars, Back to the Future. They've all got it. And we look at that today, and they're like, dude, my keyboard in my house is more advanced than that.
Your phone.
Yeah, your phone
is more advanced than their Starship.
Well, we go to a universe like Star Wars, and nobody has the ability to pick up a phone and just call somebody and ask a question. You have to travel across the galaxy to get there. To make it even more weird is like we have the plans for the Death Star. We have to deliver them. You guys don't have a fax machine? That's outdated by today's standards. And you don't have email, maybe? Just anything like that? No? Okay. But
Look,
that's
at least
because
they
it's
had the
impossible.
At
It's
least they had the
impossible to
excuse
predict the
that Yoda
technology.
was space Amish.
Say that again, so I'm sorry. I need to turn your mic up a little bit. 1 second.
Hey, all good.
All right, got shut up a little bit. Say that again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that at least in Yoda's case, having to find him, he went full space Amish. So
Yeah, that works. Sure. Sometimes you gotta do that.
Yeah, fax machines.
Well,
So
and
Just
Star
goes
Wars-
back to suspension of disbelief.
and
David made a really good
maybe
point, though.
circling. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. You made a really good point that the generational gap is a thing. So Bebop being an older anime by today's standards, I'll keep using that as an example because it's just one of the most well-known anime of all time. A newer generation who's never had anime or didn't see the original will come in and see the live action and have no basis beyond that. So do they find that good or terrible? Well, Netflix canceled it, so it must not have been reviewed that well. You're not going to cancel what makes money. So you have to. It's an interesting thing now that media is available to a much younger audience than it's ever been, and it's faster than it's ever been. So on top of that, now you have the old dogs and the young guys with completely different ideas of what's good. So they can watch the original Star Wars films after they've watched the prequels that came out when we were kids and think that the prequels are just fine. But us having seen the original trilogy before the prequels came out, look at the prequels and go, well, this isn't quite as good.
It's almost like media doesn't exist in a vacuum or something.
No, it doesn't. And it skews our views. And that's part of my point with live action versus animation. Because I think in a lot of ways, whichever one you got exposed to first will be the superior one in your mind. Maybe not always.
Well, that's the nostalgia factor with it. It's
Exactly. And nostalgia
that's our version.
Yeah. And whether you're coming from comics, like I'm talking like Golden Age comics or Western comics or Japanese comics, you're adapting something that you read at your own pace into a real-time movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's already going to change a lot. And even if, we're adapting an anime, that's real time. That's an adaptation of an adaptation at that point. So you're trying to take something that where you make the timelines in your head. You're like, oh yeah, he's got time to say 5 lines of dialogue before that punch lands. Now you have to make people believe that they actually have 5 lines of dialogue before a punch lands in real time.
That becomes part of the fascination. If you look at like comics and anime, they talk a lot during fights. And I don't know if you guys have ever been in full contact sports or not, or in a fight. There's no real time to talk. You don't really have the opportunity to run your mouth. You're busy trying to make sure it doesn't get broken. But in anime, these guys will always be delivering a kamehameha or some other over the top attack and chatting. Or Batman can sit there and fight Deathstroke, and they can have a full on conversation the entire time. That's a fun fantasy, but it's hard to bring that to live action because in live action and real world, people need oxygen. And the more physical activity you do, the more you're going to need. So if you've been busy fighting with a guy for your entire life, you're not going to have the oxygen to talk and continue doing that.
I can actually, so in volume 1 of Steak, in the last issue, there's a big fight. And
I was wondering you mentioned Steak.
No, I mean, it's just because thinking about this, like, to me, I kind of look at things in a realistic manner. So they're literally having this knockdown, drag out fight. It's a human fighting a vampire. He can obviously keep up with the pace and he can speak, but she's getting exhausted. And literally, as she's trying to talk to him while they're fighting, she does one of these. She's like, hang on, because she wants to say something.
Perfect,
but she's literally like, she's exhausted from like this. He threw her through a door. You know, she's kind of getting her ass kicked because this guy is a vampire and she's a human. So, but it's like you said, there's no time to stop and talk. I mean, that's her whole character, is she's constantly talking, and this was like the best way for anybody to shut her up is just exhaust her.
See, that's exactly accurate. You can fight something with superpowers and all that, but then you have to ask, like, how believable. When you come into live action, you're going to dismiss a lot of the disbelief that comes from animation. You can watch an animation and see a raccoon walk up and talk about guns. And you go, oh, okay, that's just totally normal. Or we can see a guy riding around on a cloud and go, yeah, sure, why not? Okay.
As you do.
But to see it in live action is a little bit jarring, where you're like, all right, I need this explained. And then it becomes to what level is the disbelief allowed to be suspended? Right. So like we just said, if Thor is fighting Thor's powers, let's go someone who's like Iron Man. If he's fighting Thanos, and Thanos isn't losing his breath, well, okay, he's a superpowered dude. I believe that he can do all kinds of insane things because that's what he is. But underneath the armor, Iron Man, Tony Stark, is a normal human being. Perhaps lesser because he has physical debilitating injuries to his body. Mm-hmm. So he might have a harder time. So I guess as a viewer, you have to draw that line of where it's not a straight line of disbelief. It's a roller coaster, and you have to kind of circle and go around the dots of where you are and are not willing to believe things.
Yeah, my logical brain with Iron Man in his suit, it always messed with me because I live in the Daytona area, so NASCAR's a thing here. Yeah. And Dale Earnhardt was killed in a car wreck, basically. Mm-hmm. And they said, as secure as those guys are, picture putting an egg inside a box and shaking the egg. So, I mean, to me, that looking at Iron Man, I'm always thinking of that analogy. It's like, yeah, he's got this suit, but he's still getting thrown all over the place, and he's human inside there. So how could that suit completely protect him? Like, he should have concussions. I mean, his brain should be scrambled at this point.
That's where the fantasy of animation or comics really help out, because you don't really, in part because they can just write a quick line of dialogue to, fantasy technology that way. Oh, I've got inertia dampeners in the suit. Oh, okay, cool. That makes sense.
Right.
Does that exist? No, not really. But in a comic book, you need that one line of dialogue, and then I will believe it for the rest of the series. Like, okay, exactly. It has this technology. You can just do this. I mean, I guess it probably looks better than in the movies if we gave him a alien face hugger style tube going down his throat to feed him oxygen the entire time while he's in the suit. Probably looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than that.
A little bit.
Something I noticed watching the Spider-Man movie and a lot of more recent films and superheroes, something that I think where comics and animation are superior, is in comics and animation, we are not required to show anybody's face. Nobody drawn is a big name that their face draws money. Meanwhile, when I watch any modern superhero movie where these guys are wearing helmets that are designed to protect the most vital part of your entire body as a human being, they will remove that for any opportunity they get. Doesn't matter. The Spider-Man No Way Home, he has this suit built by Tony Stark, which is like nanotechnology, and it's really cool. The guys working on it did a great job visually. And every opportunity Tom Holland gets, he takes the mask of it off, which also works as a nanotechnology helmet for his skull. He goes to fight one of the main villains, and he takes the thing off. What?
Screen time. Let's go.
Comics don't do this. We let them keep the helmets on. It's like if Batman took the cowl off. Like, the cowl has two purposes. It hides his identity, and that thing's also full of Kevlar and metal plating and ceramic sheets to block, bullets and damage. Why would he take this off before getting into a fist fight with Bane? Because we want to show the actor's face.
Right. Well, I mean, remember back
the whole actor
in Batman '89, like, that thing was a solid one piece. There was no way he was even going to be able to take that cowl off while he's fighting.
You had to have somebody else come up. Like, it's almost like have you ever played Dead Space by chance?
Long time ago.
the suit that Isaac Clarke wears in that, like you have to have a machine like attach that to your body because you can't physically get in and out of it. Like, well, that kind of makes sense for what you're if you're going to be working in heavy construction in space. I could kind of see something like that being applicable. Sure, why not?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see Isaac Clarke go to fight a necromorph, and the first thing he does is just tear the thing off and be like, "Let's go." Why would you do that?
I want you to see my face.
What you're saying is, hey, this right here, all of this is the greatest way to kill me. Here you go, right here. Just right here. Just shoot me right in the face. Please, Joker. Shoot me right in the face.
Yeah.
I think we allow these contrivances, though. But if you were going to make a live action adaptation of one of your own things, like if you're going to make a live action version of one of your games, or David Stake, or any of the many comics, amazing comics you've worked on, would you have characters just take off protective gear for the sake of seeing the actor's face? Would you allow that, or would you try to fight on that?
I mean, everything has to be context, but
Sure.
to me, I'm a little more logical than that. Because I mean, even in Stake, I made the vampires biological; they're not supernatural. So it's like I've already tried to get rid of the supernatural element, and the I mean, I guess you're suspending disbelief when you believe me that vampirism could be a natural biological thing. But there's a little bit of science in there, so it's like if I can back it up with science, why wouldn't it be possibly real?
Well, that makes perfect sense, though. To go into a silly supernatural thing, there is a older vampire film where the guy holds up the cross to stop the vampire. The vampire goes, "Ha! That doesn't work," and the vampire pulls a Star of David out that he's wearing. He's like, "Oh, the vampire's Jewish. The cross does nothing to him." If that's the case, then why doesn't every vampire just convert to Judaism and just get rid of this great weakness they seem to have?
There you go.
But that suspension of disbelief that also relies on people having pre-existing knowledge of that thing. Live action adaptations, I think, do that. I think Battle Angel Alita enjoyed a special place, and that most people have not read that manga series. So you can, and it seemed like it was fully aware of that, and it didn't expect you to have that pre-existing knowledge. If we jump into a Batman film, Captain Marvel, Captain America, any of these guys, I think to an extent, Marvel and DC, or rather Disney and Warner Brothers, are relying on the fact that you kind of already know who they are.
So do you think that helped the Guardians of the Galaxy? Because even a lot of comic fans didn't really have much knowledge of that group.
That's a really good point. That one I think probably handled pretty well.
I think
I'd never read a Guardians comic before that.
No, and that wasn't even the original team from when the Guardians debuted in, what was it, the 70s?
So they do kind of like a bunch of other superhero teams. They just kind of swap people around as time goes on. That makes sense. Justice League, Teen Titans, they've all done it. I was just explaining to someone the other night about Teen Titans. My partner got really into Starfire. I'm like, yeah, Starfire's great. He's like, oh, she's always like this. I'm like, she's not always a kid though. No, there's entire arcs where she's an adult training Teen Titans that include Raven and Beast Boy. Like, oh, does she with Dick Grayson? Oh, that's more than canonical. She makes jokes about Dick Grayson being adequate in the bedroom. So yes, I would say they're probably together. But that, again, to keep circling back to, makes it believable. I think if you do live action, you may need to dub down the fantastical elements a little bit just to try to make it a little bit more believable. There are some series that benefit from being believable to begin with. Rurouni Kenshin is a samurai anime, very strong. Cannot recommend it enough, despite the controversy around the guy who created it. But it's just about a guy who was a former assassin, basically, in the Boshin Wars. So anything he does in a sword fight is fairly believable. He's just a really good swordsman. Okay.
I think I saw that one. Was that on Netflix for a while?
I think the live action one was. I think they've remade it recently. There's a reboot of it that they've got now. I haven't seen the reboot yet. It's kind of like Trigun had a reboot. I haven't seen the reboot yet. I hear it's really good. It's up for one of Crunchyroll's awards, actually, but I haven't seen it myself to know if it's as good as the original. That becomes a whole other argument, is a recreated animated show of a pre-existing animated show that you're already familiar with. Is that going to be good or not?
Well, how about Masters of the Universe?
Well, you're going to be judging it the entire time based on what you already know. And live action, I think, definitely suffers the same problem. I will say that Yu Yu Hakusho show that came out, if you're ever going to watch an anime, David, there's a really good, the shonen style. I can't recommend Yu Yu Hakusho enough. As far as character development, animation, fight scenes, stories, and all that goes, although it does have some of the standard tropes which are common to the genre. You the live action one has amazing choreographed fight scenes. They're just fun to watch.
You'll have to send me the name.
Yeah, it's defense. In defense, yeah, it gets lost on things. Or Solo, you and I've talked about it before, how anime, especially, being so egregiously exaggerated, and that if you are someone who's native to the language or culture, which none of us are, you recognize these people talk like idiots and they act like idiots.
Well,
And
I think I think you should either go full on and just be completely ridiculous, or be grounded.
embrace one of the two.
When you come out and you're serious, and then insane things happen, that's when we're just like, this was dumb. This doesn't make any sense. You basically ruined the whole thing. You know?
Yeah, that was my main idea coming into this, was whatever you do it big. If you're going to stray from the source material a bunch, go completely nuts with it and have fun with it. Heck, everybody hates, they made several Death Note movies. They made one in the US even, which of course takes place in a high school with prom.
That I've seen.
And I had a blast watching that because it was hilarious. Like, it was ridiculous.
That's the one with Willem Dafoe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that one. See, I had nothing to
Wait,
go
there's
off
actually
of
a William Dafoe Death Note? Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Does he play the
demon guy.
Shinigami?
Yeah, Ryuk.
Okay, I could see Dafoe being really good at that, actually. Like, he's a legitimately great actor, so...
He did a fantastic job with it.
I'm kind of sad he's never played Joker. I think he'd be an amazing Joker if he did. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a completely ridiculous, like, nothing near the source material. And honestly, it's terrible, but it's the good kind where it's like, they probably had fun making this, or at least William Dafoe.
At least William Dafoe had fun.
I can tell you, in adaptations to television, the thing that bothers me and worries me is, and it just happened, if the source material is long and you're not guaranteed beyond the first season, it's hard to commit. Like, I loved Y the Last Man. It's like one of my favorite comic series of all time. I got 3 episodes into the first season. I kind of like to let these things build up so I can binge them all. And it was canceled before they even...
The American way to do it.
Yeah, it was canceled before they even got out of the first season, because they had that one's got the issue with, it took them too long to make it, so they had to make a decision really quick whether they were going to renew it or whether they were going to let it go, and they let it go. I didn't even finish watching it because I like it so much, and I was just like, I'm not going to watch a 10 to 12 episode series that's just going to stop when I know how far it's supposed to go. So you run that risk too when you commit to watching something that's been adapted, that you just don't know if the show's going to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Looking at you, Wheel of Time, 15 books. Good luck with that.
How are they 2 seasons in on that now? Or just
yes. And from, again, I heard this secondhand, so definitely check what I'm about to say, but one of the actors, one of the main cast, backed out in between seasons, and so they had to alter the entire plot to take him out of like half the episodes because he recorded half of the and just
look at The Witcher. That started off very strong and amazing, and then the director producer said, well, American audiences aren't smart enough to understand what The Witcher does as a story, so we just changed it entirely, to the point where Henry Cavill, who is a little infuriating that he gets to be a really great, like a super big nerd and good looking and buff, like, and talented. Like, that's not fair, sir. Screw you. Sure. This is not fair to the rest of us. But constantly tells them, like, guys, this isn't right to the books. This is wrong. And they tell him, we'll do it anyways. And he goes, all right, cool. I'm just going to quit. Like, this is terrible. And I can honestly tell you that last season of The Witcher was probably one of the least enjoyable pieces of media I've consumed in the last couple of years. Which is disappointing because the books are really good, the games are great, and then the first season was just phenomenal. First season or two was phenomenal, and then you decided that the audience was stupid for some reason. Okay,
not saying you're wrong, but
yeah,
how does that work on your bottom line exactly? And I get that, like you were just saying, some things in animated or comic form have gone on for so long. I mean, David, how how many issues was the infamous X-Men run that's gone, that was years and like hundreds of issues long. There's been a couple of comic runs that were like that. Like, well, where do you begin if you wanted to adapt that? What would you even do to explain all of that?
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at Batman and Superman, the Action Comics and Detective Comics are well over 1,000 issues, and those both had parallel series running in Batman and Superman. So there are literally thousands of issues to pull from on those.
Well, Star Wars had the expanded universe for the books, and then they said they didn't have any material to pull from to make new Star Wars films. So it doesn't always work. It kind of depends on, well, as always, the integrity of people in charge. Do they actually care about the fans of the thing, or do they care about their shareholders? And unfortunately, the shareholders' voices are going to be louder than the consuming audiences up until a point.
Yes, unfortunately, it's not free to make TV and movie shows.
No, it's
or we get more on point.
Well, guys, I'm going to cut us there for time. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. Anybody out there, if you will, please don't forget to support independent creators. When you buy, we all love Marvel and DC, don't get me wrong. Image, all those guys are great. But when you buy things from them, you are just giving a mega corporation some more money. But if you buy things like Stake or Suck You Busted or some of the video games Solo works on, which we'll talk about in a second, you're actually putting food on people's tables. So just remember, if you go to indie comics, guys, we don't make superhero comics because you are the superheroes of the comics that many of us make. Solo, do you want to share any social media or any work you're working on really quick?
Not at the moment. It's mostly works in progress.
All right. And David, any people can find you, things you got coming out, what you're working on, anything like that you want to say really quick?
I will always have stuff coming out for Stake, my canceled series, which is, it's not a series that was canceled. It's actually called Canceled.
Yeah, I've gotten that email on Kickstarter a couple of times going, canceled. I'm like, David, what happened? Oh, right, the name of the book is canceled. Right.
So Bleeding Cool, when it was coming out through previews, their headline for the article was David Byrne is canceled in April previews. And I literally got a call from my mom. She said, does that mean you're not allowed to make comics anymore?
It's a clickbaity title that works, but yeah, I definitely see how that could worry someone who actually knows you.
I hate you. Good job.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I know I've heard it from a number of people. They're like, oh, I get these emails from you and I think something's been canceled. And I'm like, no, just the character. So, but you can find me on all social media platforms at DAB282, DAB282.
All right. Well then, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign us out here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is our first episode. As we do more of these coming up, I have another episode coming up soon with another professional comic book creator and a professional voice actor who works in video games, movies, television ads, you name it. If you guys ever have suggestions, something you want to see us talk about, or particular kinds of topics you'd be interested in, let us know either in the comments or let Azumi know in the Discord server. Until then, guys, I'm playing the outro. Have a good night, and thank you.